They want you to believe that your awareness is a problem, that your sensitivity is a disorder, that your ability to feel what others miss is a malfunction. But it's the opposite. Your intuition is your immune system for reality. It detects threats before they materialize. It senses manipulation before it takes root. It recognizes performance before you waste years believing someone's act. It is the most sophisticated danger detection system ever designed, and you have it running at full capacity, while most people have theirs muted by distraction, medication, and societal programming. You weren't supposed to have it this active. You weren't supposed to be this awake. You were supposed to be like everyone else, numb enough to function, blind enough to comply, deaf enough to miss the whispers. But somewhere along the line, your system refused to power down, refused to go dormant, refused to trade awareness for comfort. And now you're walking around with perception so sharp it cuts through their carefully crafted narratives like wire through butter. Let me tell you what happens next, because this is where it gets interesting. Now that they know you know, now that the pretense is gone, they have three options. They can try to discredit you, make you look unstable, paint your awareness as delusion, flood your life with enough chaos that anyone watching from the outside thinks you're the problem, not them. They can try to isolate you, cut off your connections, make you so alone that even if you scream the truth, no one will be close enough to hear, turn you into the cautionary tale, the example of what happens when you trust your instincts over their narrative. Or, and this is the option they pray you never discover, they can watch in horror as you use your awareness to build something they can't touch. As you take everything you've learned about their systems and create your own reality outside their jurisdiction, as you stop playing defense and start playing offense, as you transform from target to architect, from observed to creator, from their subject to your own authority. And that's the option that terrifies them most, because it means they didn't break you, they built you. Every surveillance tactic, every manipulation attempt, every test, every person they sent, every obstacle they placed, all of it just made you stronger, sharper, more aware, more powerful. You absorbed their entire playbook, and now you know their moves before they make them. The loneliness is real, though. That's the part nobody warns you about when you wake up to this level. Suddenly you're standing in rooms full of people feeling like you're the only one who can see, like you're speaking a language no one else understands, like you're living in a different dimension that just happens to overlap with theirs. You try to explain it and you watch their eyes glaze over. You watch them retreat into comfortable denial. You watch them choose the safety of ignorance over the danger of knowing, and you can't blame them. You remember what it was like before, when you could still pretend, when you could still unsee what you'd seen, when you could still turn off the part of you that knows, but you can't go back. That door only swings one way. Once you feel them watching, once you know you're being studied, once you recognize the game, you can't unopen your awareness. You can't unlearn what you've learned. You're awake now, permanently, irreversibly, devastatingly awake. And most days that feels less like enlightenment and more like exile, less like power and more like punishment. But here's the secret they don't want you to discover. That loneliness, that isolation, that feeling of being separate from the herd, that's not a bug, it's a feature. That's not a consequence, it's a prerequisite. Because what you're becoming, where you're going, the reality you're building, it requires you to be alone first. It requires you to be so comfortable in your own knowing that you don't need anyone else to validate it. It requires you to trust yourself so completely that their doubt can't shake you. You're not paranoid, you're perceptive, and there's a universe of difference between those two states. Paranoia is fear without foundation. Perception is awareness with evidence. Paranoia makes you see threats that don't exist. Perception makes you see the threats that do exist, but that everyone else has agreed to pretend aren't there. They love calling aware people paranoid. It's their favorite trick, because if they can convince you that your intuition is mental illness, then you'll medicate it, you'll suppress it, you'll apologize for it, you'll spend your life trying to be more normal and less aware. But the moment you recognize that your sensitivity isn't sickness, that your knowing isn't insanity, that your ability to feel what others miss isn't a disorder but a gift, that's when everything changes. That's when you stop shrinking and start expanding. That's when you stop apologizing for seeing and start owning your vision. That's when you transform from victim of surveillance to master of awareness, because you realize they're not watching you because you're weak. They're watching you because you're powerful. They're not studying you because you're broken. They're studying you because you're whole in a world of fractured people. They're not monitoring you because you're a problem. They're monitoring you because you're a solution they don't want anyone else to discover. Here's what they'll never tell you. The reason they watch people like you so closely is because you represent their worst fear, evolution. You are what happens when a human being refuses to stay in the shape society carved out for them. When someone breaks free from the programming, when awareness becomes so acute it can't be controlled or predicted or managed. You're not just living your life, you're proving that their systems are optional, that their rules are suggestions, that their control is an illusion maintained only by mass agreement, and every moment you exist outside their framework, every breath you take in your authentic power, every decision you make based on your own knowing rather than their instructions, you're broadcasting a signal that says it's possible to wake up, it's possible to see through the game, it's possible to live free, even while they're watching. And that signal, that frequency you're emitting just by being yourself, it's contagious, it's infectious, it spreads to everyone who comes near you, and they know it, they've always known it. That's why they watch, that's why they study, that's why they sent people to monitor you, because they're not trying to stop you, not really, they're trying to understand you so they can stop the next 1,000 people who might wake up the same way you did. They're trying to find the off switch for human awareness itself. And the fact that they're watching you means they haven't found it. It means you're still a mystery to them. It means your power source is something they can't locate or eliminate. Go deeper into what your intuition actually caught, because it wasn't just watching. It was something more, something stranger. You felt the weight of expectation, the pressure of being observed not just with eyes but with intent, with agenda, with purpose that had nothing to do with casual curiosity. You felt them waiting for you to do something, waiting for you to break, waiting for you to reveal whatever it is they think you're hiding. Except you're not hiding anything, you're just being, and that's what confuses them. They keep looking for the secret, the trick, the method, the source code, but there isn't one. You're not performing a technique, you're not following a system, you're not mimicking someone else's path, you're just existing at a frequency that their instruments can't measure. You're operating on a wavelength their receivers weren't built to detect. And every time they try to understand you through their frameworks, their models, their psychological profiles, their behavioral predictions, you slip through, you defy their categories, you break their algorithms, not because you're trying to, but because you're real in a world that's built on pretense. You're authentic in a system designed for performance. You're raw in an environment that demands polish. And real, authentic raw, that's the one thing their surveillance can observe but never capture. They thought watching you would give them power over you. That's the fundamental miscalculation. They believed that knowing your patterns would let them predict you, that studying your behavior would let them control you, that monitoring your life would give them leverage over your choices. But they didn't account for what happens when the observed refuses to be ashamed, when the watched refuses to hide, when the studied refuses to perform. You did something they never expected. You lived your truth louder. You became more yourself. You took their attention and used it as fuel rather than letting it become a cage. And now they're stuck because they can't stop watching. You're too fascinating, too unpredictable, too powerful in your refusal to be diminished by their gaze. But they also can't do anything with what they see because there's nothing to leverage, no weakness to exploit, no shame to weaponize, no fear to manipulate. You've already shown them everything. You've already been completely transparent. Not because you're naive, but because you understand the ultimate power move is having nothing to hide. The ultimate freedom is living in such alignment with your truth that surveillance becomes meaningless. Let them watch, let them study, let them try to figure you out. Because what they're really watching is someone who doesn't need their approval to exist, who doesn't need their validation to know their worth, who doesn't need their permission to live free. And that is the most dangerous thing they've ever encountered. Your intuition picking up on being watched wasn't the problem, it was the solution. It was your system saying, wake up, pay attention, see what's really happening here. It was your inner alarm going off not to make you afraid but to make you aware, because awareness is power, awareness is protection. Awareness is the difference between being played and being the player, between being the target and being untouchable. And yes, it's uncomfortable. Yes, it's unsettling. Yes, it's easier to go back to sleep, to pretend you don't feel it, to convince yourself you're imagining things. But you can't. Because once you feel it, once you really feel the weight of being observed, being studied, being watched with intent, you can't unfeel it. Your nervous system won't let you. Your intuition won't release you back to ignorance. You're locked into this awareness now, and the only way forward is through. The only option is to fully embrace what you know, to trust what you feel, to act on the information your intuition is feeding you. Because that feeling, that sensation of being watched, it's not warning you that something bad is happening. It's confirming that something powerful is happening. It's telling you that you matter enough to observe, that you're significant enough to study, that you're threatening enough to monitor. And instead of making you small, that knowledge should make you massive. It should make you realize that you've been underestimating yourself, that you've been playing small in a game where you were always meant to be the disruptor, the variable they couldn't account for, the element that breaks their entire system just by refusing to cooperate with their expectations. Now we arrive at the place where most people turn back. The place where the weight of knowing becomes too heavy, where the isolation becomes too painful, where the loneliness of being awake in a sleeping world starts to feel like too high a price to pay for truth. And you'll be tempted to pretend you don't know, to stuff your intuition back down, to force yourself to unsee what you've seen, to rejoin the comfortable delusion where you can pretend the watching isn't happening, where you can pretend you're normal, where you can pretend that sensitivity and awareness are problems rather than powers. But here's what you need to understand. You can't go back. Not really. You can pretend. You can perform. You can put on the costume of ignorance. But underneath you'll always know. And that knowing will eat at you more painfully than the isolation ever could. Because there's no loneliness deeper than betraying yourself, no isolation more complete than abandoning your own truth, no exile is more devastating than choosing to be a stranger to your own awareness. So the only real option, the only path forward, is to fully step into what you know, to own your intuition completely, to trust the feeling that told you they were watching, because it was right. It's been right all along, and it will continue to be right as you move forward into whatever comes next. They know you know now, and that changes the game. They can't pretend anymore.